Hello, food enthusiasts, and welcome back to another episode of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. I'm Angela Taylor, owner and chief Indulge officer with Indulge Boise, and the host of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. And it's truly my pleasure to welcome you into our next episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the craft beer scene here in Boise, specifically, certainly in Idaho and the Pacific Northwest, and really globally. We have a fantastic guest who has such an interesting perspective that I look forward to delving into. Culinary experiences that we curate with Indulge Boise. This conversation that we're going to have today with our special guest will be very similar. In Indulge Boise, our mission, if you will, is to connect people to different neighborhoods, different businesses, different restaurants, and businesses in the culinary scene in the Treasure Valley. And we do that through interesting curated menu. We do that by talking about the public art that's on display, the culture of those particular neighborhoods. We talk about the history or the unique architecture in those spaces. And we're going to do a little bit of that today as we peel back the curtain with our special guest on not just what they do and the businesses that he runs, but also like what it takes, what's entailed in being an entrepreneur in this particular market. And as the craft beer scene continues to evolve. So I'm looking forward to taking you all on this really interesting and introspective journey. And that's what we're doing on Culinary Chats is we want to have conversations with innovative chefs and visionary restaurateurs, passionate brewers, and dedicated farmers, all of those that have their fingerprints all over what's happening in the culinary ecosystem here in Idaho, Boise, the Treasure Valley, and beyond. So settle in, get ready for an interesting conversation where we hopefully give you a little bit of food for thought and some soul food, if you will, in this conversation, this soulful conversation that we're about to have. And we're going to have it with the owner of Western Collective and House of Western, Cary Prewitt. Cary Prewitt is the boss at Western Collective and House of Western and is a lover of beverage, food, and experiences. Cary's been in the hospitality industry since his college days and has always focused on making people feel good, whether that meant booking travel with him to sporting events, getting a buzz off of his beer, vodka, slush, or seltzers, or making sure people felt like they were having the night of their lives and forgetting all of their troubles at one of his venues. Cary grew up a military brat, moving 12 times before graduating high school, and has been in Boise since 2018 when he opened Western Collective. Thanks for tuning in today to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise as we share some food for thought in a soulful conversation with Cary Prewitt. Cary, welcome to, I think that photo that we just shared on screen, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, is quite indicative of the personality that oozes in all aspects of your business. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Angela?
Doing pretty well. I am, again,
Awesome.
grateful to have you join me. So thank you for saying yes to being a guest here on Culinary Chats. I think that since you've hit the pavement here in Boise, you've added such a unique perspective to the culinary scene, certainly through craft beer. And so appreciate you being willing to continue being in conversation with me.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it and appreciate what you're doing for this city. It's awesome to see. And, I appreciate that you are on the leading edge of helping both food and beverage continue to grow and evolve in this town and make sure that that's a focal point because it's, in my opinion, very important for community.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to delve into that point that you're heading in, because what I found, I moved back to Boise in 2013 after growing up in Mountain Home, and couldn't have imagined the growth that we're experiencing now would have ever taken place. And I think, and I believe, particularly in the culinary scene, that a lot of that growth is due to the craft beer movement. And certainly with the wineries that we have locally. You've been in a variety of different markets, have been in the hospitality industry for years. Do you sense that same thing that's happening, that awakening around the culinary industry due to the craft beer scene?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to move a lot as a kid and spent a lot of time overseas in places where the food industry is different, and the focus was obviously, you grew up in a lot of times in rural Germany and like a lot more local and family owned and this, that, and the other. So, I didn't grow up necessarily going to or like living in big cities that had a big scene. Um, And then, went to college in Tampa, Florida before I transferred to the University of Texas and ran businesses in Austin since 2008. And was gone about half the time because my first company was a travel company. And it was interesting to watch what was happening in the forward thinking cities first. And Austin was generally a leader in that. I'd leave for 2-3 weeks at a time, and then you'd come back and there'd be a new restaurant open with a new hot chef that was really focused on something specific most of the time. And it was a really good picture as to what was possible. And with Boise, I started coming here, and I came rafting in Idaho in 2013. We stayed at the Modern. They did a curated dinner for us at Whole Foods. It went to 10 Barrel. I don't think they'd sold at that point, funny enough. And it was hot. It was late August and it was super hot outside. I was like, wow, it gets a lot hotter in Idaho than I thought. And just left and hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about it. But at that time, we were selling beer. When we started coming up here again, we were selling beer in 7 states and decided to bring beer to Idaho. And I was looking for a facility. This is with a brand we had in Texas called Guns and Oil. And we never made our own beer till we moved here. But I was looking for a facility in the Mountain West to build our own spot at. And, I talked my wife, who you've known since she was very, very young, Melissa, into coming up for the 4th of July, not telling her I was looking at a facility in Idaho. And, we went to Ketchum and then Stanley and then back in Boise. And once again, we got here on July 4th and it was 105. And we're like, wow, Idaho gets really hot. That was 2017. And, what I saw then was a lot of possibility. It's the good news about being in a town like Austin that's been so culture centric. And I've spent some time reading books about Austin and why that happened, in the 50s, 60s, and how that continued. I saw, we took over Payette's old facility and, came to look at it then, and Push and Pour had just opened in Garden City, and you drive around and you just see cool stuff starting to pop up and you're like, hey, there's a lot of potential here. And I thought that was super cool. But, even in 2017, the culinary scene was nowhere near where it is today. It's been really, really impressive, the pace that has really taken off in the last 3 years, in my opinion, for what's happening from a culinary perspective in town. And I think the cool part for a lot of us too, when you realize on the food standpoint, I think what's appealing to a lot of us, food and booze, we get our hops from within 4 hours most of the time, whether it's Yakima or Western Idaho. And then, from a malt standpoint, we get our malt 2 hours away. It's brought in, it's coming from Twin Falls, which is awesome. And, from a food perspective, I think we're probably up there with the second, third biggest food producing states, if I had to guess, behind the Central Valley of California. So there's a real appeal for the fact that you can get a lot from your backyard here, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is huge. So much I want to unpack there. First, you came up here in 2017. And literally a year later, you had a business open. And I think that, when you have all these entrepreneurs, sometimes we get in our own way and overthink things or try to perfect something. But the fact that you were able to move to a new market and get something up and running that now is flourishing speaks volumes about who you are as an entrepreneur. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Who are you as an entrepreneur? What did it take and require for you to be able to have the guts or the chutzpah to be able to do that?
It's complicated because, once both my mother and my father were in the Air Force my mother was in for 30 years. He was in for 23, flew for Northwest, worked for another branch of the government, rejoined the Air Force. I think has 30 some years of government service, and she still works for the Air Force in Alabama. I think has been retired for 15 years, but has worked for the Air Force for that entire time because mostly she doesn't want to sit at home with nothing to do. And my father said something to me when I was in college, and he said, son, I'm going to give you a piece of advice my dad gave me, which was get on the government tit and stay on it. And it may sound ridiculous, but, at that point I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do and trying to figure out, what was impactful to me, and my parents' opinion mattered a lot to me. It still does, obviously. I care. I want my parents to be proud of their kid. But at that point, it felt exactly like who I was not. to follow that path. And so for me, it was this weird freeing of going, hey, maybe there's a different path for me that looks nothing like the path that I grew up with. And, I always go, hey, I wish there were multiple lives we could live, because there's 5 other things I'd have loved to do. Flying jets would be one of them. But, here we are. But as soon as I discovered that and realized that you could, create your own journey pretty young, I started my first business at the age of 21, and I ran high-end travel packages to sporting events all over the world. And, it changed my life. It changed my life. And, some of the questions, I didn't really know any entrepreneurs at that time. And then, got to know somebody, and he's like, you should look into EO and join EO. So I joined the entrepreneurs organization when I was 21 and started going to global events, and, was young, single, and able to travel, and just started to realize there was this whole community of crazy people out there. And, it's funny because now we do personality testing when hiring, managing, blah, blah, blah. And, I have a fairly extreme personality that's really well situated and like positioned for being an entrepreneur. It's, on Culture Index, which we use, it's Daredevil, which is for better or worse who I am. So it's sometimes you sort of realize who you are and what you're good at. And the good news is I had that realization that was freeing to me, that allowed me to lean into that when I was, 20, 21. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity so young, I don't think.
Well, no, that is quite remarkable. And it really does show up in your brand. When I think about, so we have Western Collective, you had Western Proper that you recently rebranded
Mm-hmm.
to House of Western.
Yep.
And I love the
Yep.
conversation that you had with consumers about why the change, and that Western
Yep.
Proper wasn't indicative of that kind of, gunslinger, thinking outside the box, saying that, what, the military is not for me. And
Yep.
how challenging is it for you to, as you're building the business, to stay, on like the straight and narrow path, like, right, that everyone thinks that you have to do this linear path, versus to allow that gunslinger mentality to come in as you start to build and design and grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think life is a journey, and at the end of the day, if you're not building one that's authentic to you, then what are you doing? And it's what I was really excited about when I met Melissa, was she was really aligned with that, and we went with it. When we came up to Idaho that first summer, I thought we'd take over the facility up here, and I thought we'd live in Austin. I talked her to moving to Austin from Santa Monica, and she was in Austin for 6 months, and it just made sense for us to move to Idaho. And the thing was, I would come up a couple days a month here and there to try to get everything going, and I'd go hiking in the hills. I didn't know anybody at the time. So I'd go hiking in the hills and I'd just be like, I don't really want to go back to Austin. So after a while, it was kind of funny because, had you asked me midsummer 2017 if we'd moved to Idaho, I would have told you absolutely not. It wasn't even on my radar to move here. It was, let's run something in Idaho and we can make that work. And then, we realized that our life could be better choosing a different path. And the fun part for us is we generally ask that question of, is this authentic to who we are and who we want to be and what we want to be doing? And, and I think that framing is really interesting because, if you look at it, the highs and the lows of life are impactful on a chart if you write out your life. But, there's a lot of white space in between those times, and making sure that you're setting up a life that can be authentic to the one you want to live matters. So, for us, we do a good job of every couple months course correcting. I think sometimes people think we're out of our mind when they see a lot of deviation. And I'd say, there are times when I need to get out of the way of operating our businesses, because otherwise I drive our teams crazy because I try to put too much change in. But it's in terms of that, it's you've always got to recalibrate and update to what's authentic to you today.
Yes, that deviation could be the feature, not a flaw. I think that
Yeah.
oftentimes people run from needing to pivot. And what I think that we need to realize is that ability to be able to pivot is incredibly important. And that felt like one of the
Yeah.
things that you were able to do really well, in that you flourished during the pandemic, right? During a time when
Yeah,
a lot
we
of
did.
businesses were struggling, right? Like, from a philosophical approach, in my leadership business with the Dignitas agency, we were talking to clients about, like, COVID was a great time for disruption. It was those individuals or organizations that were leaning into it that were flourishing. Like, what was it that you all did with intentionality during that period of time to make sure that you weren't just surviving the pandemic, that you actually ended up thriving?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was about just making sure that you weren't destroying yourself mentally, like that you're not getting in your own way. And it was, I don't remember, I forget whose podcast it was, but one of the things that I really liked that they talked about on there was like, look, like there's an illusion of safety, of consistency in the world that we all tell ourselves. Like the fact of the matter is there's a lot that we can't control day to day. We can't control politics, we can't control war, we can't control whether there's going to be a drought this year. We're late November and the ski hills got no snow. And last year they were fully open for Thanksgiving. We can't control that. And what I think we do really well as a couple and as human beings, Melissa and I, is we really thrive with the idea that like, let's control what we can control and do it the fun way. We 6 months into our relationship put together mission core values that we still refer to today, and do it the fun way was really the thing that most resonated for us. So like, that's really what we brought as our mission in for both businesses. But, when the pandemic started, I'll never forget, it was the week before we really shut down here in Idaho. And I had a gentleman who was running sales for us at the time, and we were self-distributing, and he went, "Hey, things are getting dicey. People aren't buying beer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm really worried." I said, "Well, I'm worried too. And help me keep your job." Basically, it was like, look, I don't want to have anything happen to you. I don't want to have anything happen to anybody on our team. So any creative ideas? And, he's like, "What if we sell booze online?" And so I was like, "Call the state, see if it's legal." That was 1:00. By 3:00, he figured out that was legal, which was unique because the idea of home delivery was not legal in most states. So it wasn't just about selling booze online. It was about delivering booze to people's houses. And, so he did that by 3. And then by 5:00, Melissa had a website set up to take orders. And I think we got $200 in orders that night. But,
Wow.
where we always go is, hey, like, you can either control your own destiny. Like, for me, it's what I want to go to bed at every night. Am I integrous in who I want to be? And did I show up in a way that can be as impactful as possible for myself, my family, and my businesses, knowing there's plenty that I don't know, because what I know a year from now is going to be different than what I know today. So I try to really be intentional with asking myself that question, not being too hard on myself when there's things you don't know that you don't know. So the way I look at that for the pandemic was, we know the country's shutting down, and we know that we've got, at that time, I think 20 people employed, 20, maybe 30, including taproom team members. And we wanted to show up for people as best as possible. So, you don't do that by going, "Hey, we're going to let the government dictate what we get to do. We're going to ask the government what's possible, and we're going to play within those bounds." And, we got really lucky that people were looking for something to do. And being an alcohol, people were really looking for alcohol.
Absolutely.
And, we I think had to hire 10 people to help in the first 2 weeks, spot a canning line.
Wow.
And it was some of the most fun we had because we got to be resourceful again. The hardest part for me as an operator, honestly, is, running businesses day to day, because I thrive in chaos. So, for me, getting to come up with those unique solutions is by far the most fun part of my job. So like, the weird perverted thing about it is like, if you ask Melissa and I about a high we had for the last 5 years, it was getting to operate the business in the pandemic, because it allowed for that innovation that you're talking about. And you could throw stuff on the wall and see if it worked, and people didn't care if you threw stuff on the wall and it didn't work. They allowed for a lot of trial, and there was a lot of leniency in what that looked like. And they would do it with brands they trust. And the good news is people trusted us by then. Thank God.
No, you're right. It feels like we gave ourselves permission to fail in those moments,
Yep.
and we gave each
Yep.
other and ourselves more grace, so that
Yep.
inside of that chaos, right, that you're not going to be perfect all the time, but you're trying to figure it out along the way. One thing, Cary, that you mentioned a few times was this sense and idea of fun. And I think that we all
Yep.
define fun very differently. So how would you,
Mhm.
or you and Melissa, would define fun? What's fun for you?
I mean, I think, another thing that came out of that day from our session of figuring out what our mission was as a couple is to discover what's possible. Something that's been important to me since I was younger is like, why not me? It's like, I think I'm capable of a lot, and I want to figure out what's possible, just because it's to me, it's fun to get to go up and challenge yourself every day. It's why, I broke my leg in 10 places skiing this year, and I'm 37
Oh
or
my
something like that.
goodness.
And why? It's because I keep on doing bigger stuff, because I keep getting better at it, because I didn't start skiing till I was 21. And, it's the problem is that's who we are sort of built to be, is to discover well, discovering what's possible would be our definition of fun. So the problem is sometimes some people don't like us because we push a little too hard here and there, but we mostly do it just because that's what we define fun. So, fun is taking on bigger challenges, taking more and more risk, and just learning and adventuring, doing something for the first time, or, it's from a business standpoint going, hey, like, one of my goals is to run $100 million company that I created. And why? Just because I want to see if I'm capable. And I think it would be interesting to do and create. And what I will say now that I have a 3-year-old, and now that we've had businesses that have had ups and downs for years, like, there's only so much I'm willing to sacrifice to discover what's possible there versus other components of my life. Meaning, if I realize that I don't get to enjoy what I'm doing because it doesn't line up with the actions that make me happy, I'm not going to do that. I'll change my definition of what's possible and probably find a new hobby that would allow me to do that while running successful businesses.
Right. A really important perspective to be able to maintain is, right, you can be ultra competitive, right? You can be grinding, you can be
Yeah.
working toward that $100 million business, but if it still remains fun, whatever fun, however you want to define it, is the key for that. Maybe without, breaking your leg in 10 places in the process.
No, that was not fun. No, that was not fun. And the other thing for me is, like, it's what I like about the hospitality space and what we get to do is, we have different interests at every time. And the fun part for me is, as you mentioned in my bio, like, I really like providing people experiences. I remember being in Canada when Canada won their first gold, going to the medal ceremony, and like the goosebumps that I had on my arm. And I'm not even Canadian, the national anthem's going on. And like, those feelings are what are important to me. So getting to help people create like those feelings matters. And I really like that about brand and about restaurants and about alcohol. Like, it's just like, I think food's important. I think booze is important. I think booze is important from a conversation piece to, just culturally, like the experience it allows. And craft beer had a period of time in which, we were making 60 different beers a year, and there was so much experimentation, and that was so much fun for us. We're getting into spirits because mostly, it's I just don't drink as much beer as I did a couple of years ago because I'm trying not to be 200 pounds anymore, especially after drinking or breaking my leg, and realized that we like vodka a lot and liked tequila a lot, and went, hey, why aren't we doing this as well? So the fun part for me with what we get to do is we aren't sort of stuck on this linear path of, hey, we are a plumbing company. And it's like, oh, we're a restaurant. We get to recreate a menu to what's exciting for us. And so from what's possible and what's fun right now is, I really like hospitality and providing that joy and experience for people through things we decide we're passionate about at the time.
So it sounds like your why literally is that the experiences and making sure that people have great, extraordinary experiences with whatever brand that you're involved in. And it has me thinking, we interviewed Casey Allen and Dan Sell from The Still on a
Cool.
previous episode of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. And one of the things they talked about, it was ice cream for them.
Yeah.
But based on their technology, they thought it was going to be an app before, but there was an essence, there was a common denominator for what they were trying to create. And so it was less about the product or the service, but more about the why. And is that what, like, could it have been something beside beer or spirits?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I ask that question every day. One of my goals is to open hotels because it's the same thing. You get to make people feel, I remember when W hotels were up and coming, and, you walked into one, it had this dark, sexy vibe that was so different at the time and less cheap than it feels today if you go to W. But, it's just like, they get the music right. They get the scent right. They get this, that right. Like, it's just like, there's so many channels to make people feel a certain way and help them escape from their day to day, or make them feel a certain way that they want to feel. And I think booze really empowers that. But I also think hotels do. I think you could run a surfing company and do that if you wanted. It's one of my secret dreams is to eventually like run a heli skiing operation and get to fly the helicopter every day. And I get to have people have that stoke. So like, to me, it's about that fun and adventure that comes along with it. It could be anything but booze, but booze was my chosen initial vehicle. And I like the industry, and it's a challenging industry, and I like the challenge.
Well, and I think one of the things that you have a sports adjacency, right? So whether it's you taking folks to these extraordinary experiences, I know Melissa the same, being around sports in her family all the time. And one of the things that we hear from elite athletes is this positive self-talk, right? That they actually start to visualize what their goal is, what that North Star is. And so, when you're visualizing that $100 million business, what's entailed in getting there for you? Like, and And what does that look like or feel like?
Well, it's a fun question because I started my travel company at 21. I think I got into beer in 10 years ago. It's 2013. We launched Guns and Oil August 3rd, 2013. So I've been in beer for a while now. And when I got into beer, there were 1,500 breweries in the country. Today there are 10,000. So everything changed about that industry, and not necessarily all for the better. Um, so there have been many days I have negative self-talk where I'm like, hey, how are you not further along doing what you want to be doing, blah, blah, blah. With that being said, I also recalibrated from a brand I wasn't really passionate about that, I thought from what was happening culturally was getting NASCAR down and was not really about what I meant with Guns and Oil, to Western Collective, which was really the spirit of the adventure that meant to build Guns and Oil around. That was the name I had at the time. So, Western Collective was my opportunity to rebuild it. So, you know, when I visualize it, the fun part for me is I visualize having a very large booze company, whether that's right now beer. We sell a lot of seltzers. We just switched them all to vodka sodas. Western Ramblers, we just launched brands we're really, really excited about. I really enjoy that side of the business and what it can do. And at the same time, from an ego standpoint, it's fun to see your stuff on the shelf everywhere you go and get to have all the relationships. Because the fun part about that is, when we started here in Idaho, we were self-distributing for till last year. And we could go to McCall. I know everybody at every bar and restaurant in McCall, to Ketchum, to a lot of people in Boise. You don't get the opportunity to do that unless you're really involved in a business that can interact with that. And the fun part is being the booze guys. That's somebody people want to have fun with, and all the bars and restaurants make money off of your product. So it aligns in terms of end goals. And then we were focused on being a world-class brewery and really bringing product out. And a lot of the breweries here that do things really well were focused on managing product in-house. So we were one of the first that went, hey, we want this beer to be as good or better than anything else you see, with progressive styles that are not necessarily here yet. And once again, that allowed for different relationships. So I see two things. I see the booze part being a very large component of that, and taking it eventually out of state, because there's only so much you can do in a state with 1.5 million people. And then the fun part is the rest of it. Like, when I get there, I want it to be a bunch of different random experiences where, once again, I'm not trying to build $100 million plumbing company where we're doing plumbing. It's like, hey, no, like, you can only take a location in downtown Boise to so much in revenue. So all of a sudden, what that means is I've got a compound on top of that. And the fun part for me is, as we continue to build our team, I've got a great director of ops now who really is aligned with my mission and my vision, and Melissa's as well, obviously, but who wants to execute on that. And then I get to get out of the day to day and go, hey, what's next for us? And the fun part for me is that means all of these ideas that are in Melissa and in my head, like, we get to get them out and get them on paper. So for me, it'll eventually look like hotels, nightclubs, bars, and just more opportunities for breweries, distilleries, stuff like that. But all within sort of a holdings company, if that makes sense. Because I don't know, there's just too much going on in my head to want to do the same thing over and over again. I can happily build 20 House of Westerns, but I will not operate them every day. Somebody else will be operating them, because if I operate them, the teams will go crazy.
Well, and it's important that that you're aware of it. Yep. Right? Awareness is the first step in that process.
Yeah, and then there's other stuff. There's restaurant concepts I have in my head I'm really passionate about food for some reason. I don't know why I'm so passionate about food. But it's like, when we got into pizza, I spent 6 months working on our pizza dough, and I didn't know anything about pizza dough when we started. I just went, hey, this is something I really want to own and do well and be on top of. And ironically, we don't sell pizza at the moment. But it was just something I was really passionate about. And there's different things. For a while, I almost opened a ramen restaurant, and I'm glad I didn't, because it would have been similar to when we opened Western Proper. And Western Proper is 302 seats. Learning to do that is learning to run a restaurant for the first time with a 302 seat restaurant is kind of a nightmare, especially once you throw a pandemic on top of that from a labor standpoint with what was happening in the market. So I'm really happy that didn't happen, but I go very specific and, I would like this that is one of one that has a seasonal menu, or this, that, and other. So like, the fun part for me is building that big company means really taking on my passions and doing it in a way that's authentic to me, and not having to listen to a board or collective of people that are telling me we need to do something to make money, when it's more for me, hey, how do you build this collective up to something that's worthwhile for you? Hence the name Western Collective.
Oh, I love that. Amen to that. And right, so restaurants I'm in, Hotels, I'm in. I think that how exciting is that? And I imagine in order to get to that, that's a big, big dream, right?
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night
Um,
besides a 3-year-old?
besides a 3-year-old, I mean, it's, my wife's got another business with dope boxing. So, the funny part is I think our restaurant shuts down at midnight half the time, brewery shuts down late. She's busy 5 in the morning. So there's not a lot of hours that something can't go wrong. And then on top of that, when there's issues at the brewery, it's almost always in the middle of the night. So, an alarm goes off of some sort, or somebody's like, hey, the brewery has the water is coming out of the floor drains. You're like, shit. Or, I just dumb stuff. So besides the issues that could happen all the time, it's, running a small business right now is hard. Traffic flows downtown are different than they were a year ago. So just, managing cash flow is still not something that is not a voice in my head on occasion. And then managing, growth. So it's a lot of it is going, okay, we have these 10 balls that are currently in the air and we're waiting to see where they land. Did we hit that 3-pointer with a swish? Did we even hit the rim? What's our shooting percentage? This is basketball for
I
you.
love it. I
You're
love the
welcome.
analogies.
But it's the challenge is there's a lot of unknowns once I shoot my shot on some of this. I started selling vodka. Here's our vodka bottle. I started selling our vodka about a month and a half
Oh,
ago
nice.
out and about. And, the challenge is we didn't have it in. I didn't know the process for getting in the States. So, Sun Valley is like, we're going to put on the menu. Bogus says they're going to bring it in. I've just got bars and restaurants that are here to support it, blah, blah, blah. But then the question is, can you actually get that across the finish line? So a lot of that keeps me up at night is going, hey, how do you manage all these things? Well, at the same time, managing a restaurant that's got to manage a certain number of covers every night to make money. And, what's kept me up for the last 2 years is managing labor and food costs, because it's been a lot more challenging than I thought it would to manage those two. And, I just go, there are millions of restaurants in the world. How can you not be even average at this sometimes? And so that's kept me up for a lot of the last year. However, we finally hired some restaurant consultants and put processes in place and are starting to be in line with where we need to run a successful business. The hard part is if it happened last year, we'd be making good money and being able to provide bigger returns to investors. And, with where we are right now, it's just like, last night is, it's Monday after Thanksgiving. It's always going to be slow, but, you just have nights you're downtown and nobody's downtown right now. And that's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I wonder if another challenge, me being kind of a newbie to the culinary scene, like I wasn't aware of all of the alcohol policies in this particular state, and so you've operated in a few different states. Can you share with our audience, because I don't think a lot of people understand the liquor licenses or the laws or what has to happen. Can you kind of give us a synopsis of what you, as a purveyor in this industry, have to navigate?
It's funny because the one thing before we got on this call, I was Googling alcohol policies in another state to see what's possible. And it's just like the amount of information you have to digest to understand how the various states work. And then, I've been in beer for 12 years, sold beer in 7 states, and every state's different. And now that we're in spirits, the laws are different on spirits. So it's just like learning a whole new language. And then on top of it, we have a liquor license downtown, and we got one in Garden City before the law changed in June, because they changed the law to where you can't resell them after a certain period of time. You can't lease them. And I knew we weren't in we'd have to do some work to get the zoning correct, and we're finalizing that. But like even managing the city nuance of liquor versus beer is different, because the city zoning for liquor versus beer is different. So it's just like, it's a lot of banging your head against the wall when you have no idea what you're doing and you're just trying to be aggressive. But beer is 3-tier. So there's manufacturing, which is us. There is wholesale, which is like Hayden Beverage, our distributor, and there are retailers, which are Bardenay, Barbacoa, the Avery, stuff like that. So for the safety of the public and to prevent monopolies from happening, they put 3-tier laws into place after Prohibition to make it to where Anheuser-Busch did not own all of the retail establishments. In the UK, a lot of the bars are owned or controlled by major manufacturing breweries. So you go there, it's different in that regard. The funny part is they mostly have signs out front saying who, is it Heineken? Is it Amstel? Who is it? So I think it's kind of funny because at least they're honest about it. We're here, we want that separation in beer, allegedly. They do give you workarounds, like we could self-distribute and we can have retail locations. So in Idaho, you can have one retail location that is not your brewery, and that's it. So the reason we built Western proper, which is now House of Western, is I went, hey, if we've only got a second location, why not make it as big as possible? So,
Yeah.
started looking for big locations, and we looked outside of Boise and realized that our target market and people who understood our brand were in Boise proper, and went, hey, why don't we build something there and try to build a totally different experience, obviously. But the reason we did that is because I went, hey, what's missing that we've wanted to do, and how can we build something that can really add on to what we have to offer? And so the challenge that we're going to have eventually is, how do you build more? No, we don't sell beer or spirits outside of the state, so nobody knows our brand. So we are limited to where if you're Starbucks, you can come here and you can build 200 locations, or if you're a fitness studio or this, that, and other, there's nothing else that really has these restrictions. Even Bardenay has more than 2 locations because distilleries don't have the same regulations that breweries do from a location standpoint.
Okay.
But and with spirits here, you manufacture and you sell to the state, and the state sells to customers. So there are no wholesalers. There are some relationships. There are some wholesalers that are trying to help sell, but they can't technically sell the product. And the funniest part coming from Texas is Texas was 4-tier in liquor, meaning it'd be manufacturer, wholesaler, liquor store, retailer. So liquor stores would deliver to the bars. Here, you got to go pick up at the state. They don't even make an attempt. And my favorite is I met with the head of ABC last year about something, and they tell you about how the temperance of alcohol is built into the state constitution. I'm going, well, you guys are making so much money on liquor, and you have a monopoly here. So what you're trying to prevent in beer, you have here in spirits, and you're not even trying to hide it from anybody.
Right.
And it just kills me. I mean, the problem with beer to me and liquor, like, you're dealing with the irony of state law that's made up by legislatures. And then, I was vice president of the Brewers Guild in the state for the last 3 years, and you got half of our legislature here in the state that's LDS or has a DUI, and so they're not going to vote for anything on the beer side that's going to impact craft breweries in a positive manner unless it's put in another bill where this can be something that's sort of hidden to get through. And so it's really hard to change booze laws, and the state can't do it. Meaning, like, the guys that are, at the liquor, at the people at ISLD or the people at ABC, they can't change the laws. It's their job to manage and enforce the laws. So, you just sort of end up stuck. You're like, hey, this is frustrating. But, the thing is, we all play by the same rules, and that's helpful. The other challenge I have sometimes is they choose to enforce laws versus other laws at various times, and we have different interpretations of laws. We got shut down for a project we did this last year, and I went, hey, can I fight this? And they said, well, you could fight it, but if you lose, we're going to automatically take your licenses away for 30 days. And I went, that's $500,000 in sales, and that's 100 jobs, and that's a lot of families that we're feeding, and that's not a risk we can afford to take. So whether I thought I was in the right or wrong, all of a sudden you're in a position to where you can't really stand up for yourself. And that to me is what's most frustrating about booze, is when you're when you're limited on volume, and when you're limited on options and opportunity, and then when you try things and you can't stand up for yourself when you don't agree with their interpretation of something, because you're going to be punished for it in a way that you can't really afford to come back from as a business.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating, and I appreciate you giving that really thorough explanation, because as lay people, I don't think that many of us are aware of, like, the complexities and the nuance and the challenges, right, that so many businesses such as yours are having to endeavor through on a regular basis in order to run a business, a successful business that you're trying to build and to thrive, that benefits the community that you're operating within.
Well, it's, what I think is really interesting about it is stuff like booze. It's not capitalism for the most part. You're working within protectionist entities, and then you move to states like Idaho that are allegedly more capitalist, but for the most part, the alcohol laws in red states are more protectionist because they were changed by distributors in the 70s when there were no small breweries. And so they have all the leverage, and you can't do much about it because, once again, you're not going to get past through legislation. And they also have huge lobbies that spend a lot of money to prevent breweries from changing and impacting law. And look, like, I get it, but what frustrates me is we're not playing a fair game, and all of a sudden you're up against things that aren't capitalist, and it's, I don't know, I like being in a country that believes in freedoms and believes in capitalism. Just because you won 50 years ago doesn't mean you should be able to change legislation to where we can't compete fairly. The fact that we can't have more retail locations is absurd, because in my opinion, like in Texas, in other states like California, you can have five. In Texas, you either could be a brew pub and distribute to a limited extent, or you could be a production brewery. And as a production brewery, you weren't allowed more than your tasting room, and it took a long time to get the tasting room. But as a brew pub, you could have unlimited locations. So what I think is interesting is, if all of my bars and restaurants that we sold to thought that we were competing with them, they just stopped carrying my beer. Instead, the challenge is, like, it's, we're in a manufacturing game in a state with 1.5 million people. And, as Jake from Lost Grove reminded me the other day, it's only, I think it was 10 years, I'm off 10% one way or the other. I think right now, 10 years ago, 20% of tap handles were local. Now it's 30. So you've got a lot of bars and restaurants supporting out-of-state breweries, which is fine. But you go to Seattle, they don't have Idaho beer. They don't have a lot of out-of-state beer. You go to Oregon, they don't have a lot of out-of-state beer. So you've got a lot of limitations, because they're supporting Georgetown and other breweries who we collab with, who are great breweries. But, as a result, like, it's hard to build volume. And we're in a manufacturing business to where you really have to you've got to make more revenue than you've got debt, which we all have a lot of debt because stainless steel is equipment and brewers cost money. And then you've got seasonality. So we need tap rooms to help bring our revenues up, to get, because that's our source of profit, to be able to build a retail side. So the biggest challenge is a lot of these laws really make it hard for craft beer to thrive. When you go, hey, like, all we're trying to do is pay our bills and run a profitable company, and you're trying to prevent us from running monopolies. And, like, we're so far away from that, it's not even funny, because, the laws really prevent us from doing that. And it's, that's where I really get frustrated by it, is I go, hey, like, look, distributors in the state are $200 million companies. It's the brewery last year did less than $2 million in sales. And it's, we're going to be less than $2 million in sales again this year, because it takes forever to grow a lot of this, especially if bars and restaurants aren't supporting. So, the tap rooms and opportunities to have more retail locations are what would be most useful for us to grow.
So you mentioned that California, there's a limit in the number of locations you have. What's the limits here in Idaho?
You can have your tap room, then you can have one more retail location. So House of Western's our second location. And, you've got Colorado, to where in the state of Colorado, you can, as a brewery, you can distribute other people's beers. So when we were self-distributing, you could have your own distribution company, because the reason we stopped self-distributing is because it's so inefficient to run trucks. So all of a sudden you've got a beer guy dropping off a keg here, and especially as everything's as seasonal as, you're talking about like $150 a delivery here, and then maybe they buy beer next week, maybe they don't, blah, 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 to where if you could have other brands, you could make a margin on 4 products being dropped at the same spot. But no bars or restaurants really want more than one of your product at a time. So everything's really inefficient. And in California too, Stone built a distribution arm that was bigger than a brewery actually at some point. And so they had a whole arm of other brands they carried. So there's different ways that allow, there's different, each state has their own interpretation of it. Ours is, we're lucky to have the second location. And then the other thing we're lucky to do is anything under 14% is considered wine in Idaho. Anything under 5% is beer. So, we have a lot of freedom on the seltzer side as I look at bringing seltzers out of state. Like I forgot, we actually just started distributing in Montana because Hayden's in Montana, but we can't sell our seltzers to grocery stores. So Albertsons can sell them here, or Jackson's can sell them here. But in Montana, you've got to buy seltzers like High Noons at a liquor store, but you could buy White Claws at a grocery store, because vodka versus seltzer is the difference. And the vodka is a lot better product, because we switched to vodka because it's cleaner, and it just like it's quicker to do. It's not all just sugar. You're not just making product from raw sugar the same way. And when I say sugar, we are buying 55 pound bags of dextrose or just some sort of sugar that like is white and just like not as clean as making it from potatoes or white wheat or whatever, or corn. So it's really interesting. I mean, the nuance is challenging, but that's the 3-tier system is definitely it's a sore point for me, because I don't know. We'd be a lot closer to our goals if we could do more.
Right. Well, and I mean, you have a big goal, like, right. So, and I get how, when you mentioned before, for you and Melissa, It's about control what you can control. In order to be able to have the fun that you are endeavoring to have, control what you can control.
Well, the challenge right now is, we've got some opportunities for good locations in the state. And I love what we do, but at some point we're gonna have to make the choice of whether I want to sell off the beer component or build more restaurants.
Interesting.
And that's ridiculous. Like just after a while, like I could, with the distilling side, with what we're doing with our seltzers and our vodka, I could do that all day and have unlimited locations. But, we're gonna have to make that choice as to whether we want to go deeper on retail in Idaho and which sucks because I love the brewery and I don't want to make that decision. But at the same time, the brewery doesn't make money because we're not big enough to be profitable at this point. And that's what's incredibly frustrating to me.
Right. When I met as a business owner, right? Like those are part of the challenges, like these decisions that you have to make and the trade-offs. Again, sometimes because it's out of your control, you have trade-offs to make. I'm curious, when you think about the Austin versus Boise, several years ago was in Austin for a food tour operator conference. And the mayor came and spoke to us and talked about, the evolution of the Austin culinary scene to a certain extent. And it was kind of crowdsourced. He talked about like how, that at a certain point in the evolution, there were investors that were coming in and, opening up big restaurants, and that there was pushback. And what the locals actually wanted was, these businesses that may have started in, at a farmer's market that then found a way to get a food truck, that then found maybe a pop-up shop somewhere and eventually made their way to be able to have their own bricks and mortar location. And that was kind of the culture in Austin. What would you say the culture in Idaho is around, all aspects of the culinary industry? So the food and beverage part of the industry.
I think it's interesting because, the way I would really say that, the way I interpret that based on what I saw in Austin is you've got a lot of independent operators that were in Austin that were successful, whether it was people that moved from other towns to experience their dream and grow their dream, because, that was happening a lot. I moved to Austin 2006 and, you went from a lot of Tex-Mex and hole in the wall institutions, Texas Chili Parlor, Hut's Hamburgers, all these things that were, good bar food or good Tex-Mex, but not like world-class food to, okay, all of a sudden, like you said, you had people like Torchy's Tacos coming out of a food truck that all of a sudden have 85 locations around the country, and some higher end food operators that did it. And then, the best barbecue was an hour from Austin for forever. And then all of a sudden these guys started moving up from there to Austin and opening barbecue restaurants. And then you had other people like Franklin that just learned the craft themselves and decided to do it. And they started out of a food truck. So like, you had some really good people that were really passionate, more Kaizen, kind of like the Japanese word about being obsessed about their craft. They really started to take that to the next level, whether it was somebody like people running Torchy's Tacos or, Franklin running Franklin Barbecue or, what's it, the Uchi guy, I'm trying to remember their names, but you just had some people that were really obsessed with certain aspects of that, and that allowed for more. And then, as LA, San Francisco, New York got more expensive, you had some really good, entrepreneurs that had visited maybe for ACL or South by and were like, hey, life here is pretty good. The weather's a lot better than where we are right now, and it's cheap. And so all of a sudden you had some really good people that took shots at opening their first restaurant there that were really, really successful. And then people that were just like thorough with concepts. But, it wasn't a chain driven town. It was really independent driven. And I would say, Boise has a lot in common with that. You've got Funky Taco, that was a food truck before we moved here, that opened a location. And, you have at this point a lot of operators that either, cut their chops elsewhere and are moving home, which there are a lot of, like Cal Elliott from Avery and Little Pearl, to, just other operators. You've got the folks that own the Lively who, have run a business here for years, and they met Edward in Hawaii when he was cooking there. I think he did a catering dinner for something, and talked him into the promise of coming and running restaurants in Idaho. And then they came and visited and fell in love with the culture here, from it's the balance of life. I think that's what people really like here. It's the outdoor balance of life with the idea of building institutions. And to me, that's the appeal that we have as a city right now, culinary wise, compared to in Austin today, where, in 2010, in Austin, you could build an institution that people would mention over and over. Franklin. How many times have you heard about Franklin Barbecue over there? It's the easiest example, in my opinion. And, you look at that in terms of when we moved here, part of what I really appreciate is this isn't a town where you have to build trends. This is a town where you can build institutions, because the institutions are few and far between, and either the same sort of stagecoach style as a lot of the guys in Austin were, which is like an institution, but it's sort of old school food catered at a certain audience. It's not necessarily the best of the best. You people like Chandler's that came out and did steaks really well, or Barbacoa that did fun really well, but they were sort of nuanced concepts. There was no like just like straight up fine dining or straight up sushi, which we have yet to have. Edward's going to open one with a Lively at some point. But you're starting, and you've got like Wilder, which all of a sudden went, hey, we're going to do great pizza, and all of a sudden they're an institution for pizza because they've made a focus there, and then people trusted them to go above and beyond. But, I think what's really good here is people that come in here and they have some sort of focus. And a lot of us moved here from out of town, but we're passionate about creating institutions and being deep in the culture we live in. And then there are a lot of still like great local guys that came up through the food truck scene and live their dreams, which is awesome.
No,
but I mean, I think the important part there is, all of us are trying to keep chains out because they're not necessarily what's great for culture. With that being said, I did eat at Tavolata last night. It was actually a lot more impressive than I thought. And, it's being a restaurateur who wants to run a huge company. I'm not anti-chain. I'm just anti-no culture. And I thought they did their restaurant really, really well.
That's good to hear. That's next on the list. You're right. So many new concepts coming online here. It's really exciting to see. It's exciting to see talented chefs and purveyors who felt like they had to leave to be able to do what they love to do, that they now can come back because they know that they can do it here. And I think it'll be a really interesting next 5 years, a decade here in Boise for sure. But I also love what you talked about, kind of the balance of life that we all can enjoy here in the Treasure Valley and Boise as well. And so we're going to delve a little bit more into the balance of life with Cary Prewitt. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. We will be right back with the final course, where we'll find out how Cary's parents feel about his journey in the culinary and food and beverage scene, as well as some other nuggets and tidbits about Cary.
Are they going to show up on the screen here? Because
they might. I know, right? You might. And your teachers, you're like fifth grade teacher. Like, what did Cary say for his first essay?
They're like, Cary was talking about sports and airplanes. He wasn't talking about restaurants and beer.
Exactly. We'll be back with some more here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise and our special guest today, Cary Prewitt. Welcome back to Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and we're here with Cary Prewitt, the boss at Western Collective and House of Western, and have been having a really insightful conversation. Cary, I really appreciate all the perspective that you've shared with us thus far on the show, and just want to take a few moments to get to know you a little bit better. I think one of the things that you spoke earlier about was that you had two career service people in your family. And so first and foremost, hopefully your parents can watch this episode. Thank you both for your service. My father was in the Air Force for 27 years as well. And so we really appreciate all of these.
I was curious about when you said Mountain Home. So
awesome. The metropolis that it was in those 12 years. I didn't travel around as much as you. Like, it was Mountain Home, and it was Madrid or Torrejon, Spain, and back to Mountain Home. But certainly had a large impact on my life and my journey. For sure. So thank you.
You know who else is a military brat here? Sorry, I'm. We're doing stuff with Boise State right now with our Horseshoe Collective beer supporting the NIL program. One of the athletes I've gotten to know a little bit is Ashton Genty, who just won Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year today, and he spent a lot of his high school in Italy, and his parents were both in there, or at least one, if not both, was in the Air Force, which is awesome. So nice to see more military brats here kicking ass and taking names in Idaho.
That is awesome. I love that. So I was not aware that he was a military brat as well. And congrats. Can we take a pause and talk about the NIL? Again, we have this sports connection for sure.
Sorry for blowing that up. Yeah.
No. I love that conversation. And I've been talking about the NIL and all these collectives recently with your mother-in-law, who has been an executive in sports and entertainment for years and is an icon who helped me with my career in various stages in my journey as well. But so your decision to be part of the NIL process, what does that look like? What are you hoping to achieve? How important is that to you for someone like Ashton Genty?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been obsessed with sports since I was little. I don't know why, I just have. And, obviously Melissa grew up around sports and has been obsessed as well. And, I went to Texas when we won a national championship beating USC, where my wife went. And we've been around great sports as a result, being University of Texas and USC fans. And, we moved here, weren't very involved with Boise State athletics for a couple of years. And then, through EO, I plan an event there, as I've been events chair for 2 years now, with a backstage all access tour of Boise State athletics. And this was a year and a half ago, I guess. So, summer of 22. And, we got to meet Jeremiah, got to meet Andy Avalos, got to meet the whole crew at the time. And, the rest of the athletic department. And Melissa and I just came away really impressed. Something that I think is awesome about Boise is I find the leadership to be top notch, whether it's the mayor's office, whether it's athletic department, they get rid of the noise. They go, hey, yeah, we have our own personal goals, missions, blah, blah, blah. But, they're generally pro, how do we make this what's possible? Not, hey, we live within these bounds or these regulations. How do we make this what's possible? And I think the mayor's office has a really difficult job, because you have a town that says it doesn't want to grow with a town that's proving it does want to grow. And how do you make smart growth possible? And, regardless of the mayor's politics, I think their office has been navigating that pretty well and trying to push Boise forward in a healthy way. And, when we met the athletic department, we just went, hey, this is something we really want to support. So we decided to donate some money last year to get involved and, offer to start hosting events and do different things. And this was, the NIL was very new at the time. And then 6 months later, the Horseshoe Collective started, and Joe hosted his first big event at the House of Western, which was Western proper at the time. And, Melissa was there. I had just broken my leg. I was in Canada, so I didn't get to meet Joe at the time. And he mentioned that it might be kind of fun to do a beer. And nobody knew it was legal at the time, because booze in college athletics has come a long way in the last couple of years. But, it became apparent that it was possible. And, we were the first brewery in the country to do it. And once again, the reason we decided to start supporting Boise State athletics is because we were so impressed by the leadership going, hey, we can make this a tier 1 athletic and academic institution that's great and can be great for the community. And it was something we decided to support. So now, I don't know what would happen if Texas and Boise State played each other in an important game. I root hard for both of them. Only, it's surprising. I did not expect to care that much, and I really care. And so the fun part is getting to be involved in that has been really special for my family as well. But more of a story, it's driven me crazy for years that kids didn't get paid. You look at how much money these schools are making off athletics, especially going to the University of Texas. And, you just go, hey, I remember Willis McGahee breaking his leg in the 2003 national championship game. And, you go, okay, look at the opportunities lost. And then you look at women's athletics and what's happened there, obviously, from okay, this is your biggest platform you have in a lot of sports like gymnastics. You have this girl at LSU that, is killing it in terms, she was second or third in terms of NIL dollars in the country.
Yeah.
So why is it fair that the school gets all the publicity and she can't get any of the dollars off of that? And even, at my rival institution, Texas A&M, watching the Johnny Manziel documentary and seeing that their fundraising went from, 150 mil a year to over $1 billion. And you go, hey, Johnny may not have been great in the NFL and may not have liked reading plays, but he created $1 billion a year in value for the university. How's it not fair for him to get a piece of that? And they're still, the kids aren't getting a piece of the school's revenue or donations going to school, but to create programs that allow for opportunity, it was something that I was passionate about, because I think it's bullshit when, once again, let's live in a capitalist society, not a, one that's fake capitalism. And the NCAA, in my opinion, was doing a lot to restrict athletes, just like the Olympics does.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for supporting the student athletes. And you're exactly right. I think it's still the wild, wild west, right? As we're trying to figure out the parameters around NIL. But I really think it's important to have people in the community, leaders in the community, business owners that understand why this is important.
Well, the good news is you got people like Jeremiah. Sorry to cut you off. There's a couple things I want to say on it. You got people like Jeremiah that understand the impact, and you have a couple of people in the community that figured out a year ago that are really on top of it. And then I think the community, with Andy Avalos stuff and McAllister deciding not to play after he wasn't really happy with the direction of the team, realized, we don't have the money in the community that can do what University of Utah did and get trucks for the whole football team. We don't have, Caleb's getting paid 9.7 million in LA. We can't compete dollar for dollar with everybody. It's just not what's going to happen in the town of in a state with 1.5 million people versus 37 in California or 10 in LA or whatever that is. We've got to take it from a different perspective. But what it means is we've all got to be focused on it and dialed in. And, I've been really happy that the community is starting to understand, like, this is about everybody coming together, because the problem now that you're going to face being at a Boise State is somebody like Ashton right now. How much money would he be making if he was in Southern California or Austin, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? Like, the schools don't have to reach out to him. The schools aren't allowed to reach out to them unless they enter the transfer portal. But imagine if you're a car dealer in Austin, Texas, and you're not the school, and you'd be like, hey, and this, I've never heard this happening, by the way. I'm just using his example as he won the Mountain West Player of the Year. You go, hey, our starting running back at Texas tore his ACL. Like, is he going to be good next year? Well, where's a great running back? Well, there's a guy at Boise State putting up huge numbers, and maybe I could offer him some money, and then maybe the coaches would be interested. And you go, how do you prevent that? And we've got to get ahead of it by making sure our guys are paid a fair wage, and that we're at least competitive, and that the culture of what's happening around the program can keep them here, and that we can get them ready for the NFL. It matters.
It does.
So we're lucky to have been in a position to where I can say we're the first brewery in the country to have done something about it, and a lot have followed, which is pretty cool.
That's a pretty good story. Again, disruptors. That's who you guys are, to the core. Yeah. And I think the NIL is again, as we continue to refine the policies around it, it's like AI, right? And ChatGPT. I think there's a lot of fear around those tools, but it's coming, right? Machine learning is coming. And so let's make sure that we know how to leverage it properly under the guidelines and the guises. So I appreciate you both being part of that process here at Boise State Athletics. Really important.
Yeah, it's fun.
We're also curious. So, now that your parents have been able to see you and what you're doing, and it wasn't in the military, how do they feel about this journey that you're on toward 100 million?
I think they think I'm out of my mind. I had an event early on in my career. My dad for a year, he sent me jobs storing boxes at FedEx and as PE teacher. And I just went, hey, I'm good. And I came home, and I think I was 22 or 23. I was like, I think I'm down $100,000 on an event, and I've got to figure out how to dig my way out of this hole, because I can't afford to be in this hole. And then 3 weeks later, I dug myself out of the hole. And I think he realized pretty quickly that I was actually good. So, I think they'd say they're proud of me at this point, and, proud of the impact that we get to make on people and community and families. I still, my mother still thinks my style of leadership, one time she's like, your team's been working really hard. This was I was 25 at the time, or 26. I'm 37 now. She's like, you should take them out and show them, celebrate them this afternoon. I took them putt-putt golfing in Austin, where you can drink and putt-putt golf and stuff at the same time. And she's like, that's not really what I had in mind. But I'm like, I don't understand what you had in mind then, because this seemed like a great idea to me. So, the funny part is we're very different leaders, but, I think they respect the work and the hustle, and would be proud, and are proud at this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. When we think about, the reasons, the motivations, the catalyst for whatever journey we are on, it oftentimes points back to something that may have happened in our childhood, or certainly earlier on in our life. And so I'm curious, Cary, is there a food first memory, or maybe even a beer memory that you have, a moment from your past where it played a starring role in a memorable experience?
It's what I point back to most is still sports. It's experiences that made me feel something. And then I started to realize that hotels did that. And then I realized that restaurants did that. The good ones, not everybody. It's just I got the opportunity to start my own company, when we were in a recession, and I was booking hotels on Hotwire for $55 a night that were 5-star hotels that I didn't realize how cheap that was at the time, and going to decent restaurants. And then, then realizing I didn't like stuffy restaurants. I liked restaurants with culture. So the food didn't need to be compared the same. It was just more about the experience and feeling something, and making sure that the whole thing, the whole vision worked together. So it was, I do a lot of trying to experience something. With our beer, I don't judge it based on the first sip I have. I go, hey, did you come back for more? Did you have 3? Did you have 1? Did you want more? Just what does your body tell you want? And so for me, I don't necessarily, besides sports and that feeling of goosebumps, have that aha moment for dining or booze, but just realizing that I crave new, I crave interesting, I crave different, I crave innovation, and I crave people trying to make things world class that may not have been. It's with West Coast IPAs or with hazy IPAs. It took a while sometimes to get there from a style standpoint. It wasn't just like this, but you're like, oh, like I see the possibility in this. So, for me, it was about feeling possibility. And then also just like, once again, realizing I like the fact that you can get out of your day to day and escape. And, I could spend today working on financials and it could be stressful. And then I could go to dinner tonight. We're going to Avery tonight, and I can have a beautiful Cote de Boeuf and a couple, cocktails or beers or whatever, and just like get a little buzzed and just like be in this buzzing atmosphere with great service and with great people that you love. And then you're not thinking about it. It's like a mini vacation. And that's what I love so much about hospitality is you have the opportunity to make people feel something and feel like they're getting away from whatever their monotony of their day to day is. And, I think that to me is like what makes it so special. And the fun part about brands and like creating, whether it's vodka or anything, is like, it's like I was at a particular moment in time when I designed that label and it was a way I felt. And like, we just released it. We haven't really even told that many people they released it. And so many people love the way that looking at that, it makes people feel something. And we get to do that with 30 different products a year, and that's the fun part about labels and booze, is you get to do that. So that's to me, there wasn't one necessarily defining experience. It was just realizing that feeling was important to me.
That's awesome. Awesome. When you talk about the possibilities, and so you
Mhm.
have like Western vodka coming up, what are some other possibilities or projects that our YouTube subscribers and viewers should be on the lookout for, and where can they find out about them?
Well, we have, right now, it's a great question. We just launched Western Ramblers, which are a vodka soda line. They're really, really nice. Albertsons just put in a lot of stores. Jackson's going to in the spring, and you're going to see it in more and more grocery stores coming up. They're really nice. We're going to expand upon that line. Seltzer. When I say seltzers, vodka soda seltzers are the same thing to me. So like really, vodka seltzers are something we plan on going really deep in. I would like to start taking those out of state. I don't necessarily need to take the beer out of state anytime soon because I think we do really well here, and I don't think people necessarily identify with Idaho brands the same way out of state because they have a different version of Idaho in their head than we do of Idaho in our heads. So, it's there's just not a lot, you don't hear about sockeye paya, anybody really taking beer to Seattle and competing or this, that, and the other and competing. So, I'd like to take our seltzers and our vodka out of state to show people what's possible because, there's less focus on where it comes from in those spaces. So would like to really dive deep. And then vodka, like vodka is a world of possibility for me just because it's just like, I have bar mats coming that are pink that are fun that like we get to do a lot with and get on drink menus. So you're going to see a lot more focus on vodka and hopefully some flavored vodkas as we get there as well. That's really a lot of what's next is really focusing on that. If I had to guess, not due to the failure of beer because our beers are killing it. But due to the success of what's happening in vodka for us, I would guess that, 60, 70% of our business at Western Collective will be, vodka based in the next year, which is crazy. And, it's what really differentiates us from any other brewery in the state is, we are continue to focus on beverage innovation. It's, and for us, it's like, we want to be the largest craft beverage company in the state of Idaho in the next 24 months. We're very specific not to say beer. Beer is a very important component of it. It's just not everything. And we'll figure out where else that leads us. So, you'll see more there. We have a shipping container bar. I'm trying to figure out where we can activate that's currently at the back of Western Collective and not in use. The hard part is, once again, it's hard to do that in the state of Idaho with the restrictions on numbers of locations. So we may have to look out of state. In terms of the rest of it, we have one, we've got different. I'm starting to work on more restaurant concepts and I'm starting to look out of state for locations for House of Western. Once again, I'd like to do more here, but we're sort of limited on what we can do here legally. So there's not, there's just restrictions that I'm up against. So the hard part is going, hey, how do we create a lot more activations here? And I don't have a great answer to that question. I would like more sunshine and warm weather in my life. So Arizona is definitely a focus in terms of what I'm thinking about. So, it's Arizona. Arizona's probably where you'll see us focus on bringing vodka and seltzers and maybe another House of Western here in the next year. So,
So exciting. A little takeover.
excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excited about that. But, it's here. It's really about more vodka, more peak juice, more horseshoe. With our distributor, the focus right now, it's peak juice, horseshoe. And, it's some beers beyond that. But for the most part, it's like, let's continue to make it to where we have as many draft handles as any other brand in the state does with those two core items. Because once again, the horseshoe and this, it's, I see Kona Golden Ale everywhere. And all of a sudden we've got a beer that's the same style that is supporting Boise State athletics. It's great beer. So why not push that? And then Peak Juice is just a workhorse for us. It's a hazy IPA. It's a great beer. It's funny because most of us don't drink hazies anymore that work at the brewery because we overdid them for a couple of years. But it keeps on allowing us to do more of what we want to do, which I'm grateful for. And then the vodka seltzers are just, they're taking on a life of its own. So that's exciting.
That is awesome. So Cary Prewitt is absolutely crushing it in the business as you endeavor to be the largest craft beverage company in Idaho. And you crush this interview, this conversation. I so appreciate just all the work that you're doing here locally and growing your business, and the insight and perspective that you've shared with our listeners today in this episode, this conversation. I think it's fascinating what's happening right in the industry. And just when you think about entrepreneurship, so much of what you are encountering on your journey is beneficial to people in other industries as well. So thank you for your candor and honesty in this conversation, and for joining us on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise.
Well, I appreciate you and what you're doing for the community. I can't wait to hang out again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Might have to be at bacon. We get some bacon and checking out some other things that are going on with all these new restaurants that are opening up. But for my team here at Indulge Boise and the production squad at Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise, I'm so thankful and grateful for Cary Prewitt for joining us on this latest episode of Culinary Chats. We learned a lot. We learned about the balance of life and how important it is to make sure that you remember what's fun for you, and to define that in whatever way that you want to define that, because that does free you up to control only the things that you can't control, not get so burdened with the things that are out of your purview or out of your control. I learned a lot of things that I will apply to my own journey as an entrepreneur. And hopefully you all enjoyed this latest conversation that we had here on Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. Make sure that you hit that little button down below and subscribe to our YouTube channel as we have more of these really remarkable conversations with people that are doing some great things here in the great state of Idaho. So for the team here at Indulge Boise Food Tours, I'm Angela Taylor, your host of Culinary Chats with Indulge Boise. We'll see you next time.
Hello, Cary Prewitt here, House of Western Collective. Just got done with Angela over at Culinary Chats and Indulge Boise. Angela's somebody I've gotten to know the last couple of years due to family relationships and what she's been up to around town. And I think she is a consummate professional leader and just somebody that's really pushing innovation hard in food and beverage and really passionate about it, and has done such a good job of bringing such a positive, energetic spirit about what's going right. I think that's really important because so many of us day to day are focused on our problems that we see and experience within restaurants. And she does a really great job of celebrating that and asking the tough questions that really lead to those right positive energy, and also getting to talk about what's possible and why, because I think that's also something that is important to share. And she did a really good job today making sure that people understood the why of what was important to me and the why of what's possible for Western Collective, House of Western, what's to come. So highly recommend working with Angela. I think she's awesome, and I highly recommend watching her stuff if you have not yet. Hi, I'm Cary Prewitt. Just finished up a great episode with Angela Taylor at Culinary Chats and with Indulge Boise. My social media, if you're looking for me, is I think my only thing public is a Twitter, and I'm going to look it up because I kind of like Twitter and I'm learning to post more, is Roams the West, ROAMSTHE West. And you can find House of Western on Instagram at House of Western ID, or find Western Collective at Western Collective Beer on Instagram. We mostly post there. We don't do a lot of tweeting on either of those, and we post on Facebook, but Instagram's where you're going to find us hanging out, or find both of our websites. In the meantime, we've got a great Christmas pop-up for Miracle going on at House of Western right now, and we've also got dope tacos and burgers. Highly recommend stopping by. December will be a ton of fun. And, brewery will have Santa all month. We're going to have our anniversary party this month and have some fun special surprises. So come see and hang out with us. You'll probably see me drinking beer or slush or something. So, see ya.